Tomorrow at Wimbledon, Carson Branstine faces world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka. The media coverage, Wimbledon's most beautiful debutante. Tennis star turns heads with swimsuit photo. She's beyond gorgeous. Here's what those headlines are missing. This 24-year-old spent 5 years battling injuries that required surgeries on both hips and both knees. She funded her comeback through modeling because she refused to ask her parents for money. She earned a law degree while fighting to return to tennis, and she calls herself one of the best athletes on tour. But apparently, none of that matters as much as her Instagram photos.
What we're witnessing with Carson Branstine is a textbook example of how sports media reduces female athletes to their appearance, even when they have extraordinary stories of resilience and achievement. It's a form of objectification that happens so routinely, we barely notice it anymore.
The timing here is crucial. Tomorrow's match against Sabalenka, who just faced controversy for dismissive comments about Coco Gauff, should be a David versus Goliath story about determination and comeback. Instead, we're getting beautiful debutante headlines that completely miss the human drama.
Today we're examining how sports media coverage reveals our biases in real time, the psychology behind reducing complex human stories to appearance, and why the Carson Branstine narrative perfectly demonstrates everything wrong with how we cover female athletes. Let's look at the actual headlines from the past 48 hours. Wimbledon's most beautiful debutante, from multiple outlets. Tennis star Carson Branstine turns heads with swimsuit photo ahead of Wimbledon. She's beyond gorgeous, stunning brunette. The coverage consistently leads with appearance, then maybe mentions tennis as an afterthought.
This pattern is so predictable it's almost algorithmic. When a conventionally attractive female athlete emerges, media coverage immediately defaults to appearance-first framing. It doesn't matter what else they've accomplished. Their looks become the primary lens through which everything else is viewed.
Focus on her modeling career and Instagram follows isn't inherently wrong, but notice how it's presented. Professional model funds tennis through photo shoots becomes tennis star posts swimsuit photos. The agency and entrepreneurship get transformed into objectification.
What's particularly telling is how the headlines position her. She's not Carson Branstine comeback story or Carson Branstine self-made qualifier. She's beautiful debutante and stunning model. Her identity is constructed around how she looks, not what she's accomplished.
Now let's talk about what those headlines are burying. Carson Branstine's tennis career was nearly ended by injuries. 5 years. That's not a minor setback. That's a career-threatening catastrophe that would break most people. She needed surgeries on both hips and both knees. At one point, she said the last time she played a full season was when she was 15.
I've spent in total over 5 years injured. The last time I played a full season was when I was 15. I did my own research, stopped listening to people, and figured out what works for my body. I found the secret formula because I'd say I'm one of the best athletes on tour.
But here's where her story becomes truly remarkable. Instead of accepting financial help from her family, she chose to fund her comeback herself. She signed with modeling agencies and used photo shoot earnings to pay for travel, training, and tournament entries. This wasn't about vanity, it was about independence and self-determination.
I love being in front of the camera during a shoot. It's fun, I love fashion. It's been one of the reasons I've been able to pay some of my trips. I didn't want to ask my parents for anything, I wanted everything to come from me and from my tennis.
What Branstine accomplished is extraordinary from a psychological perspective. She took control of her narrative and her finances while battling career-threatening injuries. That level of agency and determination in the face of adversity shows remarkable mental resilience.
And while rebuilding her tennis career, she was also earning a college degree. Not just any degree, society, ethics, and law with a double minor in philosophy and sports management. She's planning to become an entertainment lawyer. This is someone operating on multiple intellectual levels while fighting to return to professional tennis. Family context adds another layer. Her cousin is Freddie Freeman, the Los Angeles Dodgers MVP and World Series champion. That kind of athletic excellence in the family creates its own pressure and expectations. Yet none of the beautiful debutante coverage explores this dynamic or what it means for her psychological development. So why does sports media consistently default to appearance-first coverage of female athletes? It's not conscious malice, it's something more insidious. It's the automatic assumption that for women, how they look is always the most interesting thing about them, regardless of what they've accomplished.
This is classic objectification theory in action. When we consistently reduce people to their physical appearance, we're literally treating them as objects rather than full human beings with complex stories, motivations, and achievements. It's particularly damaging in sports, where physical and mental excellence should be the focus.
Beautiful athlete narrative is also a trap. Once that becomes the primary frame, everything else gets filtered through it. Her modeling work stops being entrepreneurial and becomes evidence of vanity. Her social media presence stops being athlete marketing and becomes turning heads. The story becomes about consumption rather than achievement.
There's also an economic element here. Beautiful debutante headlines generate clicks and engagement in ways that determined comeback story might not. Media outlets are incentivized to lead with appearance because it works. But that economic pressure doesn't excuse the reductive framing.
Compare how male athletes with similar stories would be covered. If a male qualifier had overcome 5 years of injuries, funded his comeback independently, and earned a law degree while preparing to face the world number one, he'd be framed as an inspiration. The story would be about determination, intelligence, and athletic excellence. Appearance wouldn't even be mentioned.
The double bind is particularly cruel. If female athletes embrace marketing themselves or using their appearance to fund their careers, as Branstine has done responsibly and strategically, they get reduced to that appearance. If they reject it entirely, they're often criticized for not being marketable enough.
The timing of tomorrow's match makes this even more significant. Aryna Sabalenka just faced backlash for dismissive comments about Coco Gauff after losing the French Open final. Sabalenka suggested her loss was more about her own mistakes than Gauff's excellence. Now she faces another young player whose story is being reduced to appearance rather than achievement.
This creates a perfect storm of problematic narratives. You have Sabalenka, who just demonstrated how easily we dismiss young women's achievements, facing Branstine, whose achievements are being buried under appearance-focused coverage. It's like watching the same bias play out in two different ways.
What makes this particularly damaging is the message it sends to young female athletes. You can overcome 5 years of career-threatening injuries, fund your own comeback, earn a law degree, and make your Grand Slam debut, but the media will still lead with how you look in a swimsuit. That's psychologically devastating.
For young women watching this coverage, the implicit message is clear. No matter what you accomplish, your appearance will always be the most important thing about you. That kind of messaging contributes to body image issues, imposter syndrome, and the persistent feeling that you're not being taken seriously as an athlete or professional.
Broader impact extends beyond individual athletes. When we consistently frame female athletic achievement through an appearance lens, we're reinforcing cultural biases that women in all fields face. The same reductive thinking that makes Branstine a beautiful debutante makes female executives attractive CEOs and female scientists gorgeous researchers.
From a pure sports perspective, this coverage also diminishes the actual athletic story. Tomorrow's match should be about a qualifier with an incredible comeback story facing the world number one. That's compelling human drama. Instead, we're getting distracted by superficial narratives that miss the real competition.
So what should better coverage look like? Start with the achievement and the story. Carson Branstine is a 24-year-old who spent 5 years battling career-threatening injuries, funded her own comeback through modeling work, earned a law degree, and just qualified for her first Grand Slam. That's an incredible human story that happens to involve someone who also models.
Good coverage would explore the psychology of comeback stories, the mental resilience required to overcome repeated setbacks, and the strategic thinking behind funding your career through complementary work. Those are fascinating human elements that tell us something meaningful about determination and creativity.
Modeling aspect could be covered as entrepreneurship and agency rather than objectification. How did she balance two demanding careers? What did that teach her about time management and goal setting? How did the confidence from modeling translate to tennis confidence? Those are substantive questions.
As consumers of sports media, we also have responsibility here. When we click on beautiful debutante headlines more than comeback story headlines, we're sending economic signals about what kinds of coverage work. We need to demand better by engaging with substantive coverage and ignoring reductive content.
Carson Branstine's story should inspire us, not because she's conventionally attractive, but because she demonstrates what's possible when you refuse to let setbacks define you. She took control of her narrative, her finances, and her future. She earned a degree while rebuilding her body and her game. That's the story worth telling. Tomorrow, when Carson Branstine walks onto center court to face Aryna Sabalenka, remember what you're really watching. It's not a beautiful debutante making her debut. It's a woman who spent 5 years rebuilding herself, refused to accept limitations, and created her own path back to the sport she loves. That's a story worthy of our attention and respect.
The real tragedy isn't that Carson Branstine gets reduced to her appearance, though that's problematic enough. It's that we're missing incredible human stories of resilience and determination because we're too distracted by superficial narratives. We're literally choosing objectification over inspiration.
This episode was brought to you by Unstruct.ai, where we examine the psychology behind media narratives and cultural biases. The Carson Branstine coverage isn't just about tennis. It's a real-time demonstration of how we reduce complex human beings to simple, consumable narratives. Tomorrow's match will be decided by tennis skill, mental toughness, and years of preparation. But today's coverage suggests none of that matters as much as how someone looks in a swimsuit. The story we choose to tell about Carson Branstine reveals more about us than it does about her. And right now, we're choosing poorly. Perhaps it's time to demand better, not just for female athletes, but for ourselves as consumers of human stories. Because when we reduce extraordinary people to their appearance, we're not just diminishing them. We're diminishing our own capacity to recognize and celebrate real achievement.